My grandmother, affectionately known as Babu, although nobody in the family knows why my uncle named her that, it just stuck, was the embodiment of unconditional love. She was short in stature, but far from skinny, which made her ideal for hugging little boys. No matter how bad the day was, she would simply draw you in until you were virtually intoxicated by the heavy perfume that she wore, and then she would smother you in her ample bosom until you could hardly breathe. But when she released you, you were living and loved. There was no doubt. Her sister in law, Marie, lived across the street. Marie, over the years, was my benefactor and teacher. She taught me much about life and the finer things. She was my social teacher. I worked for my Aunt Marie. I worked hard. From as young as I can remember, I was working for her. Oh, she paid, and paid well. But I worked and learned. I learned about gardening by hauling manure, pots, weeding. As I grew older, I became kind of the custodian of the house, painting, mowing, cleaning. I never minded it. It was good money for one, but it was always learning something, always growing, always expanding my horizons. But when I was about 5, my grandmother died. And what I discovered was that the work that I used to enjoy with my Aunt Marie suddenly became work without that place to go and be loved and recharged. Jesus tells a similar story about two women. These are sisters, not sister in laws, Mary and Martha. In the story, we encounter Mary sitting at Jesus' feet, listening to his words and teaching. Meanwhile, Martha is in the kitchen, getting things ready for dinner. As the story continues, Martha gets a little perturbed that Mary is doing nothing to help out and expresses that to Jesus. To which Jesus responds that Mary has chosen the better part. Now, this story is the bane of existence of every pastor that has tried to deal with what Jesus said. Because inevitably, one ends up offending every single church lady, because most of them are Marthas, and where would we be without them? But they take it as an affront that Mary somehow has chosen better than they, and that their work is not quite up to par. You see, the temptation is to play one off the other. But in truth, it is a matter of balance, of the need for both to sit at Jesus' feet as well as to work the kitchen. It is, in many ways, worship and service. Without the one, the other becomes simply labor, and in time, a source of frustration and even burnout, which we have found dramatically in the church today. In fact, in our culture, we are taught that work well is overwork. And we think that with the issues facing our church today, the answer is simply to work harder at those things that we have always done, and we'll fix the church. And we get very frustrated because it's not working, because we've lost our balance. We've forgotten how to sit at Jesus' feet, to be fed as well as to feed. What is it to listen, to experience the worship, the sacraments, the community? It's one of those things that virtual can't really do. Provide that kind of safe place, that unconditional love. So where do we find it? Do we find it in the church? Do we find it in other places in our lives? But it's important for us to have those places, lest our work becomes work and we become discouraged and burn out. I had the distinct pleasure yesterday of being present when my spiritual director of the last 20-some years, Sister Anne, celebrated her Diamond Jubilee as a sister. 75 years of service to the Sisters of Divine Providence. It was quite an accomplishment, a chance to celebrate. She has taught me much over the years. There is no doubt Sister Anne is a Martha. This woman can work circles around almost any of us. In fact, yesterday, one of the more humorous moments with her was she was complaining that she had to go to bed early these days, now that she was in her 90s. She couldn't stay up past 1 o'clock. She wasn't getting as much done as she used to. But she keeps going because she has found those places in her life to be fed, to be nourished. Where are yours? Where do you find that solace, that shalom that Jesus offers? Is it in the gathered community? Is it in the midst of your work community, your school, your friends, your family? Where do you go to experience that kind of love that gives you the energy and the strength to keep your work, your vocation in perspective? I pray that you have those places, but if not, I pray that you find them, that you may have health and wholeness. Amen.